Now, I'm going to introduce someone up here to give the word today. And the first time I heard her speak was we worked at a place called the Dream Center, and she got a chance to speak to Master's Commission. And I think we were already engaged. I'm not certain. Yeah, we were. We were already engaged, but I was just kind of sitting there like, man, ooh, ouch, man. And every time I've heard her speak, I get something out of it. I know she allows God to flow through her. So without any further ado, I want to introduce my wife, Lisa Jacob, is going to bring the word today.
Thank you. He's great at boosting me up, so hopefully I live up to that. Happy Father's Day to everybody, to all the fathers out there, and not just the biological fathers, but the spiritual fathers, because I know there are a lot of you who are mentors and spiritual fathers to young ones, and that's awesome. And so thank you guys for everything that you do. Father's Day is really an important day, and it's a special day to honor you guys, because I remember years ago with my son just seeing something when Dad was out of town, and he was really little, so hopefully I don't embarrass him, but he was really little, and Mike was away for, I think he was gone for about 2 weeks, and my son was just a mess. He was just a mess. And I remember, he was so emotional, and just everything got him worked up. And normally, especially playing with younger kids, he loved it, and he never got upset, but he was just a total mess that day, or that week. And when Dad came back, it was like as soon as he saw him, he was perfectly fine. Like there was nothing wrong. It was like, we're good. And in that moment, I realized something so important about dads. They're their son's confidence. Not just their sons, their kids. They're their confidence. And when we're walking around with a world of fatherless children, we're seeing a whole lot of kids that don't have confidence. It's important that we combat that, and that we speak that confidence back into them, and that we take a moment, whatever it may be, even whether it's a woman or a man, but if you just speak that confidence into that child, because they need it. They need to hear it. I wasn't planning on saying that, but I think it kind of goes a little bit with what I'm sharing this morning. Pastor Jeff has been speaking on a series of difference makers, about difference makers, and I'm going to be continuing in that series today and talking about attitudes of a difference maker. A while ago, God spoke something to me that really began to kind of change my perspective on how I saw stuff, and that was this. He said, you can be right or you can make a difference. You can be right or you can make a difference. Sometimes we do get both, but what I've learned is when I begin to shift my focus to making a difference, that I really don't care a whole lot about being right anymore, because it doesn't really matter. Because if I'm right and I don't make a difference, what did that do for me? In speaking on this series, just in talking about difference makers, there really is a challenge that's before us, and I kind of want to start with that this morning in settling this in our own hearts and in our own personal lives. We have a decision to make, because each of us do have a call on our life. And the word says that many are called and few are chosen. And I think it's very important that we understand who does the choosing. We do the choosing. We're all called, and we choose whether or not we're responding to that call or whether we're walking away from it. And so we have a choice before us. in that call, whatever it may be, it's going to look different for each of us, but in that call is a call to be a difference maker and is to make a difference. One of my favorite quotes is, to the world, you may be one person, but to one person, you may be the world. And when you make the choice that I don't care about the recognition, I don't care about my pride, I don't care about my stature, I don't care about the seat that I get sat in, what I care about is those around me and how my life affects them, how my words affect them, how my actions affect them. And when we can live life like that, we begin to make a difference. And so we have a decision in front of us, and that is, do we really want to be a difference maker? Do we really want to answer that call that God's placed on our life? Because I'll tell you, it does cost a lot. It really does. We may not think it costs, but it does. It costs us a lot. But the reward is so much greater. But we have to be willing to accept that we may never see that reward this side of heaven, and that's okay. It's not okay with our flesh. It's not. My flesh is definitely not okay with that. My flesh wants to see reward daily. It does. I'm just going to be real. But we have to be able to put our flesh to the side and be okay. The first, I have 3 attitudes that I want to focus on this morning, and the first attitude that I'm going to focus on is humility. I think that is definitely an important attitude when wanting to make a difference. When you're wanting to be a difference maker, pride will rob you of it every time. Okay, pride it will not just rob you of making a difference, but it's going to rob you of your destiny. It's going to rob you of a lot. Humility is an attitude that will help you make a difference, and I think that we see it fleshed out very well in the life of David. And so I want to share just a little bit about him. Take a look at his life. See, King David, he was human. He was not perfect by any means. He made bad decisions. He had flaws. He took another man's wife. Then to cover it up, he took that man's life. He had lustful thoughts. He had awful thoughts. He had struggles. And yet, in 1 Samuel 13:14, David is referred to as a man after God's own heart. So understand that having humility, being a difference maker, nobody's asking you to be perfect. Nobody's asking for perfection. It's called trying. It's called taking the steps daily. And when I mess up, I got to do what I need to do to make that right. So in looking at a little bit of the backstory, the Israelites had the best leader ever. They had somebody who took them out of Egypt, that got them out of slavery, that walked them to the promised land, that walked them through the desert for 40 years and then took them into the promised land. No one ever could have cared for or loved them more than this leader, more than what God did. They had the best leader, but they couldn't see him. They couldn't see him. And in order to hear him, it cost them something. They had to take the time to get in a place where they could hear from God. They had to be like Moses and be willing to go up on a mountain and hear God. And they weren't. They weren't willing to do that. They wanted Moses to do it for them. And so then the day came, fast forward many, many years, and the time came where the Israelites are looking around and they see every other nation has a king but them. Everyone has a king. So they decided, we want a king. And they went to the prophet Samuel, and they said, give us a king. And he tried to explain to them what that was going to cost them, what having a king actually meant. It's going to cost you everything. It's going to cost you your land. It's going to cost you your children. It's going to cost you your freedom. Give it to us anyway. So he went before God, and God said, give them what they want. And God sent them this man named Saul. And Saul, he came from very small, very unimportant tribe, very humble place. And he was anointed king over Israel, and he was doing a great job. And then the day came that pride hit and robbed him of his destiny. He became prideful, and he thought he could do what Samuel was supposed to do. And he decided to take it upon himself. And in that moment, God rejected him as king. And so God sent Samuel to look for another king, and he found this boy, this shepherd boy, David, and he anointed him king over Israel. And in that moment, David knew he had been anointed king of Israel. So where should he go from there? To the throne, right? He was just anointed king. So he should go to the throne. And he should be in the palace. And he did go to the palace, but not to the throne, not to sit on the throne. He went to serve the throne. He went into the palace and he served the man that God just rejected as king. And served and served and served. And Saul became like a father to him. And he was just there to serve. And the day came that Goliath had come, and nobody was willing to fight him. Everyone was terrified of him. And David humbly knew that God was greater and that God could do anything. And so David went out, slayed Goliath, and the people began to give their praise. And Saul heard this, and Saul became angry. And so they're in the castle, and David's playing his harp because Saul's troubled, and David's playing the harp to try and calm his spirit and give him peace. And in the midst of that, Saul gets angry, the pride creeps up, he's hearing these voices in the back of his head. He becomes angry and he throws a spear at David. This man who is supposed to be like a father to him, just threw a spear to try and kill him. So he leaves the room, but he comes back and he continues to serve. And this happens multiple times. Why did David keep coming back? He came back because he was serving God and not a person. He chose to be mistreated because he was serving God and not a person. And then the day came that it was evident that Saul was determined to kill David, and it was time for him to flee. And so he fled for his life. And this is the part of the story that I want us to focus on. Because in this, I want you guys to think, if you have any wounds, any hurts in your life, they can be big, they can be small, but if you have wounds that are festering, that are there, that have been hard to let go, I want you to get that in mind. In 1 Samuel 24, it says, Saul was pursuing David, and it says, in verse 3, it says, he came to the sheep pens along the way, and there was a cave there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. David and his men were far back in the cave, and the men said, this is the day the Lord spoke of when he said to you, get this, I will give your enemies into your hands for you to deal with as you wish. Then David crept up unnoticed, and he cut off a corner of Saul's robe. And afterward, David was conscience-stricken for having cut off a corner of his robe. And he said to his men, the Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, or lift my hand against him, for he is the anointed one of the Lord. With these words, David rebuked his men and did not allow them to attack Saul. And Saul left the cave and went his way. And in fact, this actually happens another time in Scripture as well. One of the main things that David had was humility. He had already been anointed king, but he refused to seat himself on the throne. He took the back seat and he waited for God to do what God needed to do. And friends, this is such a hard thing. It really is. It's a hard thing. But we can't miss this very important lesson here. In 1 Corinthians 10:23, it says, I have the right to do anything you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but not everything is constructive. No one should seek their own good, but the good of others. David had the right to do with Saul what he wanted, but he decided he wanted to make a difference instead. Let's think about it. There's so many things, I don't know about you guys, but for me, there are so many things that I have the right to do, but is this beneficial to anyone other than me? I have the right to do this, but who will it benefit? Think about it for a minute. Have you ever been wronged? Really, have you ever been wronged? It hurts. It hurts. It hurts bad when we're wronged. Especially when it's somebody close to us. Now imagine for a moment having a time where, and maybe you've already had this, but I want you to think about a time that you've been wronged, something that maybe is fresh in your mind. And if you don't have something to think about, I applaud you. Don't dig deep to try and remember anything, because that means you've already let it go, so you're good. We don't want to bring that back up. But if it's there, if God's dealing with you on it, it's there. But imagine having the opportunity, and like I said, maybe you've already had the opportunity, but where the person who wronged you is now placed in your hands, and it's your turn to decide what to do. You can justify the wrong done in this moment, and you could be right. But I challenge you and I challenge myself in this moment to view the outcome. View the outcome in light of the cross. In light of everything that he was wronged. What does my justice produce? What good will come about it? And will my justice mean anything in eternity? Will it mean anything in eternity? Friends, I'll never forget a moment in high school when I had a teacher. I was wearing a Christian shirt to school one day, and I was acting and doing things that didn't line up with what my shirt said, and I had a teacher who just lovingly pulled me up to the desk, and she just looked at me and she said, "Lisa, they're watching." And I'm like, "What?" And she's like, "They're watching you. They're watching how you're acting, and they're reading your shirt, and they're seeing that it doesn't line up." Friends, they're watching us. The world is watching us. They hear what we say, they see what we do, and they're determining whether or not this Christian thing is really worth it. Do we really mean what we say? Are we really walking out what we preach? A couple weeks ago, my Aunt Linda came to visit us, and I love getting to spend time with her, and we got to have this really special moment where all of my sister-in-laws and nieces and my mom and my aunt and we were over at my sister-in-law's house, and we got to just have this moment. My youngest niece was turning 13, and it was a time to honor her and to just kind of speak words of wisdom to her and just pass on any wisdom that maybe we had. And my aunt said these words that she said my grandmother had always said to her, and this is what she said, and it just has resonated in my spirit ever since. She said, "You're as good as anybody. You're as good as anybody." you're better than nobody. How powerful is that? Those are amazing words, I think, to keep us humble. You see, humility isn't being a doormat. It's not letting people walk all over you. But it is making sure that you don't make somebody else a doormat. Humility is taking your rightful place in Christ. It's standing firm with the belt of truth wrapped around your waist, the breastplate of righteousness in place, your feet fitted with the readiness of the gospel of peace, your helmet of salvation, and your sword in the Spirit. And it's making sure that you know what that sword is for, that sword is to defeat the enemy and never to cut anyone in the body of Christ, never to hurt a child of God. And to understand whether they're a believer or not, they're still a child of God. Whether they agree with us or not, they're still a child of God. Whether they speak hateful words to us because they don't understand where we come from, they're still a child of God. God still loves them. And get this, just as much as he loves us. I had a really ugly moment one time, years ago in ministry, where I had to look in the eyes of a pedophiler. And I had nothing good that I wanted to say to that man. And I heard the voice of God say, I love him too. That's heavy stuff. I love him too. And I heard this man speak about how nobody will let him forget about the horrible things he had ever done. And how he's trying to change his life. And he's trying to have a relationship with God. But the church won't let him. They won't let him forget. Now, would I ever let him hold my child? Absolutely not. But do I need to say hateful things to him? No. Because you can love people and not be foolish. You can love people and not sacrifice things you're not meant to sacrifice. The next attitude I want to talk about, it's the second attitude of a difference maker, is love. And if we look at Matthew 22, verse 34 through 40, and this is something because God really began to shift my understanding of what my call is years ago when I thought it was my duty to let people know when they're sinning and to let people know when they've done wrong. And sometimes we do have to speak those things, so please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But God began to show me that my biggest call is this. Because in Matthew 22, there's Pharisees, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they're trying to kind of catch Jesus and kind of trip him up on his words. And they said to him, one of them said, "Teacher, what is the greatest commandment in the law?" And Jesus replied, he said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two things." Everything that God has called us to do hangs on those two things. Loving God and loving our neighbor as ourselves. Love is putting others' needs, hurts, and desires above your own. When we're able to focus on other people's hurts and their needs and their desires, we tend to leave our own hurts, needs, and desires at the feet of Jesus. And really, that's the best place for them, because no one knows how to care for them better than God does. And he doesn't just know how to, he will. He will. In John 16:33, Jesus tells his disciples, he says, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world." It's guaranteed. We've settled that. We're going to have hurts. We're going to have bumps and bruises. Christ had them. We will have them. We're going to face trouble. But we have the beauty of knowing that Christ already overcame it. He's overcome the world. And if we allow him to, God can do a really beautiful thing with our hurts. He can use them to make a difference in someone else's life. And when I think about hurts, really, I think about rocks, and I think about we're walking through life, and it's like somebody throws a rock at us. And sometimes it can be a pebble. It can even be like sand. Like they threw sand in our face. It's like we don't even feel it. We wipe it off, and we go about our day. You know, and sometimes it may be a little one, and we can choose to be petty, you know, this little rock that really didn't even leave a bruise. But it hit me. It hit me, Carol. And you know what? You were wrong for throwing it. Yeah, it didn't bruise me, but it hit me, and I'm watching you. But sometimes it's a pretty big rock. And it can be devastating. And it can hurt. And it's like we go through life, we have our backpacks. And this is in our flesh, this is what we tend to do. When we've been hit with a rock, we pick it up and we put it in our bag, because one day, Carol, the opportunity's gonna come where I'm gonna get to throw this back at you. The day's gonna come. The day's gonna come and I'm gonna get to throw this rock. And so we walk through life and we start putting the rocks in. We're hit with another rock and another rock. And this is what we do. I'm not leaving that rock there, because someday I'm gonna get to throw it back. And let me tell you, when that time comes, I'm gonna have a rock just as big, if not bigger, and it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt. And I think it's called social justice. Yeah, it's called social justice, because I'm gonna take care of those who are hurting other people. But the problem is, I gotta carry this, guys. I gotta carry this bag now. And it's getting heavy. Let me tell you, I have a 32-pound baby, so I'm pretty tough, and I can carry a lot. But this weight's gonna get heavy soon. And what happens when we start having stuff that weighs us down? We can't walk right. We're hunched over. I can't see correctly because stuff's holding me down. I can't walk looking. It's weighing me down. It's causing me more pain. It's hurting me more. And it's causing other issues in my life. But I'm going to carry it, because the day's going to come. The day is coming, and I'm going to get to throw it back. And then something happens. The day comes where I just can't. I can't take it anymore. And so I put the bag down, and I will take out rocks, and I just start throwing them at anyone who is around me. And right now, friends, this past year, we have spent a year, even more, but this past year, it has been a lot And we have seen a lot of ugly rocks being thrown at innocent people. We have seen a lot of people caught in a lot of crossfires because we're not willing to let our pride fall, because we're not willing to be humble, because we're not willing to let go of the anger and the hatred. We're not willing to love relentlessly like Christ loved us. Did he ever pick up another rock? Did he ever take a crown of thorns and put it on someone else? He was perfect in every way. In every way. He deserved nothing that he got. He deserved none of it. And yet, he looked at us. He looked at us. And he willingly chose to walk through it. So how do we love relentlessly? How do we remain humble? How do you love someone when they've really wronged you? When they've thrown a rock that didn't deserve to be thrown at you? People, I've had people call me racist, and I love that, and I laugh. I do. Like, you're right. I am. I hate all white people. No, I'm just kidding. But like, truly, it makes me laugh. But I say that because we have people say ridiculous things all the time. Why do we take offense to it? Why? My husband, this past month or so has had ridiculous things said about him all over Facebook. Ridiculous things. Why? Because he's standing up and doing what God has called him to do. And there's people who don't like it, and they're getting ugly, and they're saying ridiculously stupid things. And I look at it and I'm like, how can I be offended at your complete and utter ignorance? I can't. And we can stand up and we can fight back, but truthfully, no battle's going to be won on Facebook. Ever. Ever. If I can leave you with any wisdom today, that would be it. No battle will ever be won on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or MySpace, if anybody still has that. I don't know. Is that still around? It won't. So how do we love when you see that complete and total ignorance? And that's where the third attitude comes in. And it's understanding rather than judgment. Proverbs 4:7 says, "Wisdom is supreme, therefore get wisdom." Hear this, friends. "Though it cost you all you have, get understanding." Get understanding. Why is understanding so important? Because when you begin to understand the why, you stop focusing on the what. When I begin to understand why you are being irrational and why you are saying these hurtful things, I stop focusing on what you are saying and what you are doing. With my children, even with Jada, because she has moments where she is kicking and screaming and just all over the place, and I'm like, I know she is too young to whip that tail, but I really want to right now because I don't know why she's acting like this. When I stop and I realize she's tired, she's just tired. When I understand the why, Mama Bear kicks in and I just want to help her, and I just want to love her. Okay, we're going to take a nap. And that may mean I have to hold you and let you kick and scream for a minute until you fall asleep. But I know when you wake up, you're going to be all smiles again. And that's what happens. When you begin to understand why we stop focusing on the what, we have a whole lot of people right now focusing on what's. We do. And the bigger problem is that there's a whole lot of what's out there. There is a lot. We are living in a day of just a whole lot of racial and social tension. And I really think one of the only ways that we're going to fix that is by being willing to stop looking at our own injustices and get understanding. If I can understand why. I've had a moment, where I've looked at somebody of a different nationality, of a different race, and I'm like, I don't understand why you hate me. We've never talked before, but you hate me because of my skin color. And when I had a private conversation with somebody later who explained the why, I could look at that person now and say, yeah, I would probably hate me too. And I am so sorry. And I was actually able to hug that person, and they let me, and I survived. I'm just saying, it was touch and go for a moment, but I did make it. But that moment would have never happened if I was focused on the injustice of this person hating me for nothing I did. I did nothing wrong. I had the right to stand up and be mad at that person because they were judging me based on this. I had the right. But I laid down that right because that right will not fix anything. That right will never, ever fix anything. It might make me feel good for a minute or two, but it'll fix nothing, and it'll mean nothing in eternity. If you want to be a difference maker, you have to give up the right to not carry these anymore. You gotta give up the right to not carry the rocks any longer. When I look at hurts and offenses in my life, no matter how great, no matter how small they were, but when I look at those offenses in light of the cross, how can I choose to carry them any longer? Truly. When we look at what he did and the sacrifice he made, and we look at his why in Hebrews 12, it tells us his why, and it gives us a challenge. And this is where Paul speaks, because in Hebrews 11, he's telling us about all the heroes of the faith in the Bible, in the Old Testament, telling us all the great things that they did. And then in Hebrews 12, he says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles us, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out before us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who, here's the why, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sitting down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinful man, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Because in your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. And you have forgotten the word of encouragement that addresses us as sons. My son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines, here's the other why, the Lord disciplines those he loves and punishes everyone he accepts as son. So endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as sons. For what son is not disciplined by his father? If you are not disciplined, then you are illegitimate children and not true sons. Moreover, we have all had human fathers who have disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of our spirit and live? Our fathers disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good, that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees, and make level the path in front of you. Get the rocks out of the way. Get the rocks out of the way. Make level the path so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. Don't leave the rocks there. See, it's one thing. When somebody throws a rock at you and hurts you, okay, I'm not going to pick it up. I'm going to leave it there. It's taken a lot because I want to pick it up and I want to throw it back at Carol right now. We're still going to be friends after this, right? I hope so. But I'm not going to pick it up. I'm not going to throw it. I'm just going to leave it there. You know what? It takes a lot more to pick it up and get rid of it. Why is that important? So nobody else trips on it. So no one else picks it up and throws it. So that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. We're living in a land that needs healing. And if we want something different, we have to be willing to do something different. Make every effort to live in peace with all men. And to be holy, because without holiness, no one will see the Lord. And finally, verse 15, which this has become my life mission statement. Because there was a day that I was questioning everything. There was a moment where I said, God, am I really making a difference? Has my life really meant anything? And I asked God, what do you want me to do? And I literally opened my Bible and it just fell to the scripture. And this is what it says. See to it that no one misses the grace of God. See to it that no one misses the grace of God, and that no bitter root grows up to cause trouble and defile many. So we have a decision today. Unfortunately, we don't get to make a decision of whether or not we ever get hit with a rock. Because a lot of times, they come out of left field. A lot of times, we weren't expecting it, and it's just there. Sometimes it was meant for us, other times it wasn't. And unfortunately, that's a choice we don't get to make. But we do get to make a choice of what we're going to do with it. So we have our rocks in our bag. And our choice is this. Are we going to carry it through the rest of our life, waiting for the moment that we can throw it at somebody and allow it to weigh us down and keep us in bondage? Or are we going to throw them at people and hurt other people in the process? Or are we going to leave it lying on the ground for other people to trip and stumble on? How do you do that? How do you leave it lying on the ground for other people to stumble and trip on? I'll tell you one way. You talk about it. Did you hear what my husband said to me last night? Did you hear? Let me tell you. And then I tell you. And then I go home, and he's got roses, and he's massaging my feet, and he's telling me how sorry he is, and just pampering me, and I've forgiven him. But did you forgive him? We talk about it. Now, I'm not saying, because there are times, there are things in our lives that, a hurt may come, and we need to talk to somebody, and we need, and that's where I have one person that I call a lot of times is my sister-in-law, Mike's sister, and the reason I call her is because I really hate talking to her when I'm upset about things, because she's not going to tell me what I want to hear. I know she will never tell me what I want to hear, and she will never feed into my anger and frustration. She will. And there have been moments, and I was totally wrong, but there have been moments that I've never wanted to hang up the phone on somebody more than I wanted to hang up on her. I'm telling you. And thankfully I didn't, but she loves me enough that she's going to tell me the truth. And usually shortly after, I'm able to have my own healing, and I didn't hurt anybody in the process. And so that's somebody that I will call when I'm really, really needing to vent about something the right way. I'll call her, because she won't let me stew in it, and she won't let me fester, and she won't let it continue to boil. And you guys can go ahead and come on out, sorry. So that's leaving it on the ground. That's one way we do that, because we talk to other people, and now they get hurt by a rock that was just thrown at us. And the last decision is we can take this and we can place it at the foot of Jesus, the feet of Jesus, at the foot of the cross. And we can ask him to show us, what do you want us to do with this? And right now we're going to enter into a time of worship. And babe, can you come up here for a minute? Just stand in front of the stage. And I know faced them. I've kind of used this analogy before. Maybe I need you to come up here, because that's farther down than I was expecting. But I've used this analogy before, is we go throughout our day, and we have our backpack on, and we begin to just get weighted down. Things come on us. People say things, and they stick to us. And we let them, because we've had our quiet time in the morning, but as the day's gone by, that voice that made so much sense is not as loud, because there's other voices that are louder now. And we begin to be weighted down more and more and more. And when we enter into a time of worship, something beautiful can happen. Because worship isn't just for God. it's for us, because in that moment when we begin to lift our hands and worship, all that weight just falls to the ground. All those hurts just begin to fall off of us, and we're able to be free. I believe, I didn't write it down, but I believe it's Galatians 5:1 that says it's for freedom that he set us free. It is for freedom that he set us free. And when we choose to hold on, when we choose to keep the anger and the hurt, we're saying, just a minute, I need you to hang there a little longer, because I'm not ready. I'm not ready for my freedom. Can you stay on the cross a little bit longer, God? Can you stay up there? Because I'm not ready to accept the gift that you gave me. You can be right, friends. You can hang on to this and be right. But it's going to cost you. And is it worth